It's the tale of four international leaders, a former president, a president of El Salvador, and a man who hopes to be prime minister of Canada. The right man in the right place can save a country, and the wrong man in the wrong place can destroy a country. And that's really what this election season's all about, isn't it? We're going to dissect these four leaders coming up in just a moment. Also, Dr. Phil comes around on radical transgender ideology. He's finally starting to earn that doctor title. We're going to give you that and a whole lot more. My name's Larry O'Connor, and it's time for Larry. It's noontime East Coast time, and we're live on Rumble right now. Thanks for rumbling along with us here as we break down what's going on in this country and around the world. And a quick programming note. Tomorrow, we will not be live at noon because we're going to be engaged in the CPAC conference in Washington, D.C. We will be back for a special live from CPAC show on Friday, though. So I want you to tune into that. But at this time tomorrow, I'll actually be on stage during the CPAC conference with my buddy Kurt Schlichter, Matt Boyle from Breitbart, and Monica Crowley. So if you're watching the CPAC stream, I think that's streaming live on Rumble as well. In fact, I'm quite sure that it is. Well, we'll see you at noon. Just not on this channel. We'll see you on the CPAC channel. Otherwise, thanks for tuning in right now. Thanks for watching us after the fact if you are on Rumble or on YouTube or any of our social media platforms at Town Hall Media. And if you like any of the segments that we're doing today, if they move you, if you think they're powerful, like yesterday, you seem to really like our attack on Jessica Tarloff there on the 5 at Fox News. That got shared crazy amounts of times across this platform and other social media platforms. Do that. You like a segment you see right here? Share the hell out of it everywhere you can so people can see and participate in what we're doing. All right, last night, Donald Trump appeared at a live town hall presentation on Fox News' Laura Ingraham show. A couple of things here as you watch the former president engaged in the South Carolina primaries, which will be this Saturday. Think first about how he's doing compared to how Joe Biden's doing, engaging with a reporter, engaging with audience, engaging with topics, hell, engaging with stairs, merely climbing up them to get up onto the stage. And also recognize exactly the messaging coming from Donald Trump right now as he is taking ownership of the Republican nomination and waltzing right into the general election. First here with talk about who might be his running mate. That's right. It looks like he's already narrowed it down to a short list. Get a load of these names.
The audience has been asked who they think would be a good choice, and various names came up. One of them was, of course, Vivek Ramaswamy. He's made a big splash. Ron DeSantis, who's making an appearance today in South Carolina, we just found out. Obviously, Tim Scott, Byron Donalds, and a big presence here for Tulsi Gabbard. Very interesting. And Kristi Noem as well, I should say. Right. Are they all on your short list? And when can we expect that you will announce your choice?
All right, we're going to get to the answer. Obviously, the answer is important, but a couple of things here that should garner a comment or two, which I haven't actually seen much in the media. So he approved of all of those names that were just laid out there, including Tulsi Gabbard. We'll get to that in a second. But did you notice the second name was Ron DeSantis? Ron DeSanctimonious. Ron, the, bête noir of the Republican primary right up until about 5 weeks ago. Ron DeSantis, the man that Trump and Team Trump demonized and ridiculed and sort of really minimalized in every possible way over the course of the last year. He was mentioned as a possible running mate, and Trump didn't object to that. Anyone else notice this? Anyone else think this is kind of strange and noteworthy and frankly newsworthy? It looks like Trump is seriously considering Ron DeSantis as his running mate. What a powerhouse Republican ticket that would be. Also, Tulsi Gabbard. That's incredibly noteworthy considering her last public position was as a congresswoman for the Democrats out of Hawaii. And listen, Tulsi Gabbard is very strong on a lot of issues, but she is contrary to most Republican or conservative orthodox ideas with regard to abortion, with regard to healthcare, with regard to government spending. it's obvious that Trump is trying to keep all of his options open here. And he wants to, it appears, make a splash with this pick. Although what you're about to hear from him suggests that he doesn't really put a whole lot of weight in who his running mate might be in terms of whether it wins an election or not. Here, let's watch.
That you will announce your choice.
The one thing that always surprises me is that the VP choice has absolutely no impact. It's whoever the president is. It just seems. I remember when Sarah Palin was actually picked, and she did have a big up, and then they just went after her at a level that nobody's seen. The Republicans themselves went after what they did.
But you'll be a one-term president because you've already served, so you can only serve for one term, although they say you'll never leave office. I assume that you'll never leave. There'll never be another election
Don't
again.
do it. He'll never leave. He's never going. Oh, these people. They are
so for that reason, it is important who you pick.
So I think it's very important. But look, first is that, as we said, it has to do with whoever is, it's a very important position for that reason. You would like to get somebody that could help you from the voter standpoint. And honestly, all of those people are good. They're all good. They're all solid. And I always say, I want people with common sense because there's so many things happening in this country that don't make sense. Who wants an open border? Who wants high interest rates? Who wants all electric vehicles? And they're fine, but you want to have choice. You want to go to combustion. You want to go to any hybrid. I think the hybrid are much better from that standpoint. But we were talking about faucets. We're talking about so much. It's all based on common sense. We want a strong military. We want choice in education. We want to have things that can really make our country great again. What we're doing with the open border is a disaster. We are destroying our country. We're going to change that fast, and we're going to get your energy prices down.
Mr. President, thank you so much for this.
All right, so that was the very end, as you can see, of that interview. And a couple of things that are noteworthy here. Again, not only is he suggesting that all those people on his vice president's list are qualified and a viable option, which I think should come as a surprise to a lot of people that a Tulsi Gabbard would be a viable option, or again, Ron DeSantis would be a viable option. But also, this is new messaging from President Trump, if you've noticed. Common sense. All of the things that he is laying out there, securing our border, being open to all energy options to bring our costs down. Common sense, common sense, common sense. God, that's a strong message. Because if you're like me, you sit and you watch what's going on in our country right now. You look at what's going on the border. You look at what's going on our streets with crime and criminals who are allowed to walk free without bail and then commit crimes again. When you look at men being able to use women's locker rooms when there's a teenage daughter sitting there trying to get dressed for PE class or for her swim class, and you just think to yourself, where the hell is common sense right now? The left stands for ideas and agendas that are the complete opposite of just basic common sense. And as they're saying, he's a crazy right-wing fascist conservative, he's awful. You know how these things work. You and I, we're plugged in. We look at politics on a daily basis because we're obsessed with it. It's our hobby almost, right? Because we recognize that it's our job as dutiful, informed citizens to be on top of everything that's going on in this country. But, breaking news alert, most people aren't like us. Most people don't follow the news as closely as we do. You know that when you try to engage them in a conversation on issues and you got to go back and explain stuff from the very beginning because they haven't been paying attention every day, can be frustrating, right? And so this is important because all they're hearing from the mainstream media and the left and from Joe Biden and the Democrats is that Donald Trump is about to destroy our country. If you elect him, there won't be another free election again because he's a fascist and he's going to turn the Justice Department against his enemies. He's going to throw him in jail. And he's absolutely outrageous. And then you do tune in. Maybe you say, okay, let's see how bad Trump is. And you see him sitting there looking casual, surrounded by voters who are applauding for him and cheering for him. And he's just making sense with common sense ideas. And the first thing you're going to think of is, well, they're gaslighting me. They're lying to me. They're lying about Donald Trump. This is so powerful and so strong for him as he starts to make that pivot into the general election. Now, you'll also notice one name that was not on the short list for vice president, and that would be South Carolina's favorite daughter, Nikki Haley. They addressed that idea of Nikki Haley being the running mate, and here's how it went.
Some people used to say I was running because I really wanted to be vice president. I think I've pretty well settled that question.
Has she settled that question?
Well, I settled it about 3 months ago. And look, she's not working. She's here. She's down by 30, 35 points. And everybody knows her. You're not supposed to lose your home state. Shouldn't happen anyway. And she's losing it big. I mean, really, I said Big Lee and Big Lee. She's losing it bigly, but we're gonna really do a job. I think that, as you know, when we went to Iowa, we got the biggest margin in the history of the caucus, the biggest. That's a long time.
Why do you think she's staying in the race?
I don't think she knows how to get out, actually. I really don't. She did terribly in New Hampshire. She got the only vote she got was from Democrats.
But she has a lot of money behind her. What do they think they're
Well,
getting
they're trying to hurt me because of the general election. So the Democrats are giving her money, and she's playing into the game. And I think she just can't get herself to get out.
That's 1,000% right, and it needs to be emphasized over and over and over again. Listen, let's take both of these little exchanges that we just watched and put them together. Choosing a vice president is important, obviously, because you're choosing a person who could become president, God forbid, if anything happened to the president of the United States, number one. Number two, you're also choosing someone who, if properly employed, will actually be a functioning part of the administration and a valuable advisor, if not someone who will take over some certain tasks that the president delegates to the vice president to handle and take care of. But number three, and most importantly in this case, it's a very unique situation where Donald Trump, it's baked in the cake, will only be a one-term president. When he selects his running mate, he is automatically choosing single-handedly the front runner for the Republican nomination 4 years from now. Let that sink in for a minute. Think about it. Right? Absorb that. Donald Trump has incredible power and influence right now in choosing his running mate, because whoever it is will automatically be the front runner 4 years from now. And a lot of people are saying that Nikki Haley is staying in the race so that's her. So she's the front runner. She's going to stay running. She's going to take it all the way to the convention. So when all is said and done after this election year, Nikki Haley is going to be the first name on people's lips when they start thinking about 2028. And at this point, because she is staying in as long as she is, because she is funded by Democrat interests and never Trump interests, because she appears to be reading from the script of Bill Kristol and the Lincoln Project, she's actually doing the opposite to herself. She doesn't know how to stop this. She's sitting on all this money, so she's thinking to herself, well, why should I get out? I've got all this money. Let's just keep going. I guess she's in this delusional state that if something were to happen to Donald Trump, or if he gets imprisoned or put behind bars, and for some reason at the convention they decide they don't want to go with Trump because he's been convicted of a crime, which is not going to happen. But even if it did, they think that they're going to turn to her? No. That convention's going to be full of delegates who are committed to Donald Trump. The last thing they're going to do is choose the woman who is spending all of her time and all of the Democrat money she's getting to bring Donald Trump down. Now is the time where Republicans need to unify and take aim against the person who really does deserve all of the criticism, Joe Biden, and whoever's pulling the strings for Joe Biden. Nikki Haley isn't doing that. She's spending all of her time attacking Donald Trump. She continues to divide the party at a time where we need to be united against Joe Biden. So she's actually harming any future she might have, unless, and I'll just throw it out there for you, unless she's planning on running on a third-party ticket. Earlier this week, Joe Manchin, the Democrat senator from West Virginia, ruled out running on the no labels ticket. Last week, Larry Hogan, the former Republican governor of Maryland, did the same when he announced he'll be running for the Republican nomination for Senate in his state. That means the no labels crowd, who has gone through the process of getting on every ticket in the country, they don't have a nominee. They have an infrastructure. They have some money. They'll probably be able to pull 5% of the vote of just people who don't like either candidate and don't want to vote for Robert Kennedy Jr. And it's quite possible that Nikki Haley will swing over there. And if she does, by the way, that could actually hurt Donald Trump. And I've always thought that Robert Kennedy running as a third-party candidate, an independent candidate, that hurts Biden more than anybody else. I don't know anybody out there who's voting for Trump And then we'll say, oh, wait a minute. If Bobby Kennedy's in there, I guess I'll vote for him. No, no, no. If Kennedy's getting any votes, it's from liberals. It's from Democrats who recognize that Biden is a disaster, but they'll never vote for Trump, right? But if Nikki Haley gets in, I think you will get some tried and true country club, establishment, Mitt Romney, Bush type Republicans who don't like Trump at all and would only vote for him if he's the only choice they've got because they can't vote for Biden and they can't vote for Kennedy. And if she is an option for them, they'll vote for her. That could hurt Trump, actually, if she does that. And that could be part of her calculation. All right, more of Trump being really good at communications, at reasonable ideas, at sharing where he is right now in this campaign with Laura Ingraham, because I really want to show you again this distinction between what he's demonstrating right now as his leadership abilities, his cognitive abilities. He did this entire interview without any note cards, without any cue cards. It was all live, no edits. You don't see Joe Biden doing this ever at this point. Here's more Trump.
You ever just say to yourself, I'm done. This is what they. Why? A lot of people would have said, I'm going to come out. Why are you staying in this?
I can't because I want to make America great again. It's not great right now, and we can do that. We can do that. Laura, we can do it. We can get it fixed. It's harder now. It would have been so much easier if we just finished off that. Everything would have been so perfect. We had the border set. Everything was set to rock and roll. We had no.
So you feel like you have an obligation to America because.
So it's a great question, and this is actually a real strength for Trump going into the general election for a lot of people again who aren't already committed one way or the other. You look at everything they're throwing at him. You look at everything they're going through. He's now been fined $355 million. They want to take away his properties. They want to take away his wealth. They keep him from doing business in New York. It's like, why are you doing this? You could just walk away. Why are you doing this? And if you're a Trump hater, your answer is, well, because he's a narcissist and a fascist and he's power hungry and he wants to get in there and destroy our country and become the next, Mussolini or whatever. And if you like Trump or love Trump, the answer is because he loves our country so much. And he's doing it selflessly and taking one for the team because he's such a patriot. I wonder if you're in the middle and you're not committed one way or the other, if there is anyone like that in this country anymore. I wonder how that answer resonates. Because I think logically speaking, most people would look at this and say, oh my God, if I were in his place, I wouldn't go through this. Why is he doing it? And it's certainly not to make money. In fact, it's cost him money to be in politics, bigly. I think that's a real strong, persuasive message that he's given. He was also asked by somebody in the audience, by the way, this message that you're hearing from the left, that, are you just doing this for revenge? When you get into office, and part of this is because of that one answer he gave to Hannity, which again, anyone with a brain knows that it was a joke. When Hannity says, are you going to be a dictator when you go in there? And he goes, and what was his answer? Only on day one. Only on day one. I pay everybody back on day one. And again, obviously a joke, but at this point, 8 years into it, nobody gets Trump. Nobody understands this stuff. All right. So he was asked point blank, are you going to try to take revenge on your political opponents?
I don't care about the revenge thing. I know they usually use the word revenge. Will there be revenge? My revenge will be success.
That's a great answer. And again, great leadership from Donald Trump at a time where he needs to be displaying this to voters. See, we're getting into that time now where this isn't just the diehards looking at what's going on. And it's time to actually start convincing people that he's not the scary monster that the media and Democrats are calling him. And to that end, there was one other really important exchange here where Donald Trump answered specifically about this judgment against him in New York, what he's going to do to appeal it. And then he did something that so many of us, we Reagan youth Republicans, we Constitution-loving, Mark Levin listening, Rush Limbaugh-loving Republicans have been wanting him to do. He referenced the Constitution of the United States. Watch.
Conservative. Everybody made money. There was no victim. The bank gets up and says, we love this guy. I mean, they
you
love
paid back the loans.
100%. No defaults, no anything. The bank asked me to, banks lend money. That's how they make money. They asked me, would I borrow some money? They asked me. I didn't need the money. I had a lot of cash. And what happens is this guy ruled that I was guilty before the trial started. He didn't even know anything about it. He ruled that a house in Florida called Mar-a-Lago is worth $18 million when it's worth from 50 to 100 times that.
Would you give up one of your properties to settle this?
Look, we have, I wrote this out because it was so great. I just looked at it. People call up, all of your friends, the lawyers call up. They say, it's the most egregious punishment anybody's ever seen. Tim Scott knows that. He sees it. The Eighth Amendment. Excessive bail shall not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishment inflicted. That's the Eighth Amendment. Excessive fines.
This is a state court ruling.
I have a fine.
Yeah.
I did business.
Donald Trump reading from the Bill of Rights is a good thing to see, and actually starts to resonate, I think, again with voters and anyone who is attempting to look at this, if they still can, with a fair set of eyes. You look at that ruling, you look at the judgment from one guy, from one judge, no jury up in New York, and you wonder if that is excessive, if that is cruel and unusual punishment. And I guess that's also a glimpse into what his appeal is going to be on that decision. So that's a glimpse of who the Republican voters in this country have selected, it appears, as their presumptive nominee to be president. And we know what kind of president he is because we've already had 4 years of it. And leadership can actually make a country great. We're also witnessing in our White House leadership that can destroy a country. Leadership that actually is feckless, takes the American people for granted, takes the law for granted, takes international norms for granted, and shows weakness to our enemies, foreign and domestic. His name is Joe Biden. He's the president of the United States. And here he was ascending the short stairs of Air Force One just yesterday. Oh. Yeah. Air Force One has that giant, majestic staircase that gets rolled out to the main door there at the front of that big converted 747. Or actually, it's a 777 now, I think, that they use. And there's something about the president of the United States, the leader of the free world, ascending that staircase, turning and waving to the people of his country or to the people in the country that he just visited to let them know that I'm in charge. Freedom is in good hands. We got you here. And we've got this incredible arsenal of power and technology that will be utilized to protect the freedoms and the hopes and the dreams of people around the world, as well as the people in the United States of America. Symbolism is so important with the presidency. It has been from the very first. You read about George Washington and how his uniform was important. The colors of his uniform were important. The color of his steed, his horse that he would march into town with when he was making an appearance. Symbolism was incredibly important for George Washington and every president since then. You're kidding yourself if you don't think it is. This president is literally incapable of climbing those stairs. They're no longer allowing him to use those stairs because he can't physically make his way up the staircase without stumbling, without tripping, and without assistance. So now he's using the short stairs. You see, Air Force One has multiple sets of stairs. I haven't been on Air Force One, but I've been on one of the planes that cabinet secretaries use. In fact, a little later in the program, I'm going to talk about the trip I took with Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and other members of the media to South America. And yeah, the Secretary of State and his staff and important dignitaries, they come down the big stairs in the front, and we peons in the media, even conservative talk show hosts, we use the stairs in the back. And on Air Force One, they've got this other mini little set of stairs that come out from the belly that people in the media, other staff members, maybe even crew members of the plane, they take to get in and out. That's where Joe Biden's entering the plane now. Because even this White House recognizes how damaging it is to the presidency and to our nation to see him stumble. and he can't even do this right. We're going to watch it one more time. I also want you to watch at the base of the stairs. There's now a brand new Secret Service agent whose main detail it is to catch him if he falls. Watch. You see that guy in the suit there? He's coming around. Now, he's cropped out of the shot, but he's standing right at the bottom to catch him. See him? See his head there? To catch him if he falls. He has trouble ascending 10 steps. Oh, but you might be saying, listen, this is an elderly man, Larry. You know, it's understandable, right? I mean, it's hard for people to go upstairs. Okay. How about when gravity's working in your favor? Here we go. Boy, this is a very, very deliberate, slow approach. Did you see how he had to look at every single stair as he came down the stairs? Watch how he deliberately takes, with his hand on the rail. He almost wobbled there. I think he had to stop and right himself. He's pretending like he's looking. Now he's not looking at anybody now. He's looking straight down at every step as he barely makes it down without incident. Now, I point this out to you not because I'm trying to make fun of the president and not because I'm trying to ridicule him, although if that were the case, that would be fully within my rights. I mean, the second we can't sit down in front of a camera and publicly make fun of our president, we don't have a country anymore. And by the way, people like Jon Stewart and Stephen Colbert, they have made a living doing that year after year after year. This really isn't about making fun of him. And it's certainly not about his age. Because that's all you're hearing now, if you notice. Anyone who dares to talk about the president's lack of cognitive abilities, you hear them say, oh, well, you're raising the issue of his age, even if you're not actually raising the issue of his age. You see, the White House, Democrats, left-wing media, mainstream media, Biden apologists, they want to gaslight you and flip the script and immediately say, oh, it's a question of his age. And it's not. If we had an 81-year-old man who could joyfully run up the steps of Air Force One, I'd be thrilled. If we had an 81-year-old man who could project strength and power and agility and physical ability as well as mental acuity, that'd be great. And there are 81-year-old men who are fully capable of doing that. Joe Biden is not one of them. Joe Biden's problem is not his age. Joe Biden's problem is his ability and what his brain is actually doing right now as it attempts to function at a pretty high level. The reason why the media and the White House press secretaries are, whenever you raise a question about his cognitive ability, and they'll immediately say, oh, well, let's talk about his age. No, I don't care about his age. If he were 50 years old and he had mashed potato for brains, I'd have a problem with it, wouldn't you? The reason why they keep pivoting and saying, oh, that this is about Joe Biden's age is because they immediately follow up and say, and as you know, Donald Trump is just 3 years younger than him. And there are a huge number of voters right now who really wish they didn't have a 77-year-old and an 80-year-old running for president. They do. And they know that. And they've tested it. And they've messaged it. And they've polled on it. And they know that most people think that both of them are too old. But look at what you just saw from Donald Trump at last night's town hall versus what we see on a regular basis from Joe Biden. And you tell me there's any similarity between the two, given the fact that they're only 3 years apart. And that's why they're doing it. This is all about twisting and warping the message coming out of the White House right now so that they're gaslighting you and making you think that the whole issue is Joe Biden's age. And it's not even close. Here's Fox News reporting right now about, again, whether the White House and the Democrats have a plan B going here because he's so debilitated.
But when he was boarding Air Force One to head to California at Joint Base Andrews, he had a little bit of a stumble on the stairs, heading up the stairs onto Air Force One, and he was wearing these dress shoes that we haven't seen him in as much recently. They've been putting him in sneakers because we had noticed that every time he's wearing the dress shoes seems to be when he is having issues on the stairs. But he wore those shoes and had a little bit of a stumble going up the stairs. So we will be watching to see if he switches back to the brand new black Hokas that he was spotted wearing in Delaware this past weekend, guys.
You would think his team would put, some sort of a grip on those stairs and put him in different shoes.
Well, Jackie, and those were the shorter stairs because I think he used to do the full flight and the White House changed that to the shorter version, right?
Can't somebody just carry him up the stairs?
I think that's an image that no one wants to see. But, typically they have him in the Cole Haan sneakers. They're like dress sneakers. And I mean, let's be honest, a lot of people wear those, including on the Hill. They're more comfortable. But, the president, especially when he's going to events, likes to wear dress shoes. And seeing him in the Cole Haans has been sort of a recent development in the last 6 months. But for whatever reason, ditched the dress shoes yesterday and had a slight stumble. I wouldn't say it's the worst of what we've seen. But there's a heightened awareness whenever anything like this happens, guys.
Well, he is 40 times 2. So now they're making a joke about it.
40 times 2 plus 1.
Okay, indeed.
Indeed. Yeah, we're talking about the president's shoes. We're talking about whether he's wearing Hoka tennis shoes or Cole Haan sneakers that are made to look like dress shoes versus dress shoes. And as Jackie Henry said, a lot of people do that. You know who doesn't do it? Donald Trump. Remember when Donald Trump was at the commissioning ceremonies at West Point, and he had to walk. It wasn't actually commissioning ceremonies; it was something else going on at West Point because it was in the winter time, and he had to walk down the ramp from where he was standing, and he was taking his time because it was slippery. Do you remember how overanalyzed that was, and how the media bent over backwards to talk about how his brain was broken and he had no mental capacity anymore? And that there was something. Remember how they analyzed how he drinks water out of a bottle and suggested that he didn't have any functioning motor skills, right? And that he needed cognitive tests. Do you remember the endless hours that we wasted on Donald Trump's inability to carry out the duties of the president of the United States? And now with this guy, we get nothing. We get this.
I did not pay their dues. He'd encourage Russia to, quote, do whatever the hell they want. I guess I should clear my mind here a little bit and not say what I'm really thinking.
His brain is broken. And it has nothing to do with his age. And it has nothing to do with what kind of shoes he's wearing. And if you don't believe me, believe the document filed with a federal court by U.S. Attorney Robert Hur, who said after analyzing his behavior with classified documents, they recognize that he broke the law, but they're not going to take him to trial because no jury in the world would convict a senile, friendly old man like this, especially a D.C. jury, because the jury pool is weighted in the favor of Democrats. Boy, oh boy, this is the face that is being shown right now to the people of the world. This is the face of American strength and power. And you wonder why in just the last 3 years we've had wars breaking out in Eastern Europe and in the Middle East. You wonder why our enemies are testing us on a daily basis. Yeah, a good president can make a country great. A bad president can destroy a country very quickly. Great example of that is in El Salvador. The country of El Salvador just reelected their president to a huge margin. And he is a generational change right now for the people of El Salvador. He represents a generational change because he has come in and approached his job in a way like none of his predecessors ever did. Let me just explain for a second that El Salvador was amongst the most corrupt, crime-ridden murder capitals on the planet. And in just one term, this man who somehow won the election has converted that nation to have one of the lowest murder rates on the planet. Why? Because he's gone after criminals, prosecuted them, and locked them up and thrown away the key. I have a personal experience with this man, and I'm going to share it with you in just a moment. But I want you to first watch this exchange with a reporter from the BBC. He is completely fluent in English and in Spanish. So he will actually take this question in English and answer it in English, which makes it a lot more digestible for our show's format. Take a watch.
Mata Alvarado, and I can pass obviously on all the details to your team. His mother was bringing food to the prison where he was at. It turns out he'd been moved to the Secot some weeks, months in fact, earlier, while she was faithfully bringing food to the prison. It seems like he's completely lost in the system. And there are 2 órdenes de liberación in his name, one as recently as June last year. And yet he's simply not been released, even though the 20 days is obviously now 6 months ago, by which time he should have been out.
Because I find this.
Now, real fast, the question here is about the accusations that he is imprisoning innocent people or imprisoning people without due process, and they've been held up, instead of holding them just for 20 days before they get their court date, it's been 6 months. By the way, research what's going on with the people that were involved in the events of January 6th, and you'll recognize that this is not unique to El Salvador, number one. But number two, watch how he handles this answer.
Somewhat amusing when they say, oh, but in El Salvador, they arrest people, and some of the arrested are innocent. And I'm a little baffled because I wonder if in the UK, all of the arrests are of guilty people, or your police sometimes arrest innocent people. I mean, I bet there will be a percentage of people arrested by UK police, the police of the government that you work for, and they will arrest sometimes innocent people as a mistake or because they had a wrong tip, but they will go to a judicial system. If there were no arrest of innocents if there was one police in the world, one police force, UK, Spain, France, you name it, any country, the US, Canada, any police force that has 0% of margin of error, they only arrest guilty people. Why will you need prosecutors or defense or a justice system? You won't need that because the police is perfect in your country.
All right. So there's more to this, but it's a great, again, obviously he's blowing apart the hypocrisy of the question when the reporter says, well, that you've arrested a couple of people that have been innocent. Well, of course, innocent people get arrested and then they have their day in court and then they get released. And that happens sometimes. The police don't just always arrest people who end up being guilty. The question is obvious and should never actually be asked unless you come from a perspective of condescension toward the country that you're addressing here, because you already presuppose, baked in the cake, that you're going to go out there and just start arresting everybody and taking them off the streets because you're a third world banana republic, right? I mean, that's really the root of the question here. And this is, by the way, I didn't mention his name. This is Nayib Bukele. He's the president of El Salvador, who just won re-election by a landslide because of the great work that he's done in El Salvador. He continues on this vein.
Now, it is different when you have in countries that promote ethnic cleansing, for example, or they promote or they arrest political opponents, or they arrest a minority. But in our case, all of the arrests are made to end the bloodshed that we lived for decades. And we have ended it. Now, did our police made a couple of mistakes? Of course they did. That's why our judicial system has been freed innocent people, and they will free every innocent people that the police has wrongly arrested. And we have already freed 7,000 people. Now, I would assume that the criticism may come from a hypothetical country that doesn't have any arrest of innocents. But I'm sure that in the UK, they do plenty of arrest of innocent people, and then they are proven innocent in court. So what does that mean? That means that you shouldn't arrest criminals? No, it means that police made a mistake and some retributions have to be made to the people that have been arrested wrongfully. But we don't think, we think it's weird, or we're baffled by the criticism of something that you well know that any police in the world would make, which is a small percentage of of innocent people getting.
Yeah, and it is. And when he says we're baffled by this, it's appropriate because understand something. Once again, Honduras, Guatemala, El Salvador were the 3 highest per capita homicide rate countries on the planet year after year after year after year. They had horrible, corrupt governments. The other 2 still do, actually. El Salvador is the first one to actually emerge with any kind of real leadership and reforms. And this guy comes in and he palpably changes things 180 degrees by arresting the criminals, by arresting the gang members, by arresting MS-13 and shutting them behind bars and getting it done quickly and cleaning up the street. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. But he's made huge strides, and any objective person looking at that recognizes that he is doing a great job. And the question is, well, you've arrested some innocent people. Well, yeah. That happens literally on every country on the planet, that innocent people get arrested. What is your point exactly? And the fact that the question was even asked shows you the patronizing attitude that this BBC reporter takes towards Central America and really any of it. But I'm sorry, would you rather we go back to where we were? This is how you make progress, when you inherit the mess that you've got. I've got more here because this guy really is a dynamic figure, and I want to tell you my personal story with him in a sec.
So what do? Okay, we do something and we save people, and now we're the safest country in the Western Hemisphere. But suddenly something's bad. Oh, but you shouldn't do that. You should do what I think you should do. Why? Not only we have the right to do what we think is right, and what the Salvadoran people are gonna decide whether or not they want this day in free elections, but also we've proven it works. And you haven't proven that your system works in our country. Might work in yours, I don't know. But it doesn't work in ours. It's like I told one time a member of the European Union, I know you Brexited that, but I told a member of the European Union, you take your best government, choose your best government. I don't know what's the best government in Europe, but you choose your best government. Same people, same talent, same experts, same will to do things the right way. You take your best government and you put him to govern Afghanistan and tell them, okay, you govern Afghanistan the same way you govern this European country. They'll be dead in a week because you cannot govern Afghanistan like you govern Europe. So stop trying to make us use your recipes because they don't work here. You have your own system. We don't tell you that you shouldn't have a monarchy. I mean, we're fine with your monarchy. We love your monarchy. It's fine. But we don't say, oh, you shouldn't have a monarchy and you shouldn't have hereditary titles. Why? Because it's your country. You can do whatever you want with it.
How great is this guy? How great is this guy? And again, he's making such a great point. It's like, dude, you've had like several hundred years since you had the Magna Carta there in England, all right? And things are a little bit different in your system of jurisprudence than I'm coming in, I'm inheriting the murder capital of the planet. I've got gangs, MS-13 gangs, who ran this place and had politicians in their back pockets. And you're at me because there's a little bit of strong arming going on when we make some blanket arrests and we sort it all out in the court system. Screw you. By the way, when was the last time a BBC reporter asked Xi Jinping about his strong arm tactics against his political opponents in China? It's funny how that question is never asked over in Beijing. But this guy, who's actually trying to make a difference in a free society, he has to deal with these questions. It's disgusting. It's despicable. But it's typical. I guarantee you that this reporter is a liberal left-wing lunatic who has just decided that it's his job to speak truth to power there in El Salvador. So Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, in the last 2 years of his time in the State Department, he did something kind of cool. When he would go on an international trip, he would select 1 or 2 people from alternative media, conservative media for that matter, to travel with him to sort, instead of just the regular press pool, he would, ask talk show hosts to go with him. Our colleague Katie Pavlich and Guy Benson from Town Hall, they both went on trips with Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. I did as well. In fact, my travel companion during the trip was my buddy Buck Sexton. Fellow radio talk show host, I should say, Buck Sexton. He and I had a great time for a week the two of us were seatmates with all these other, reporters from Voice of America and Wall Street Journal and stuff like that. And we were different, let's just say. And our trip was to Buenos Aires, Argentina. We went to Ecuador. We went to Mexico City. And we went to El Salvador. And actually, while we were in Mexico City, we had an overnight. And Buck and I went out to a restaurant, had lots of tequila, and ate guacamole with crickets on it. That is a fact. There's a picture out there somewhere of us eating crickets, grasshoppers, some kind of bug. Because you only live once, right? And pretty much whatever we got from the crickets, the tequila killed. So it was fine. Anyway, back to El Salvador. This gentleman had just been inaugurated. I think he had only been in office for about 6 months, I want to say, because it was July of 2019. So that works out. And he held a press conference, a joint press conference with Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, and he spoke fluent English. And so members of the press from the American traveling press were able to ask him questions. And I said, a huge number of the immigrants who are illegally crossing our southern border into the United States of America come from El Salvador, come from your country. They've been fleeing the crime here, and they've been looking for refuge in the United States of America. And there are other leaders in South America and Latin America who put a lot of pressure on the U.S. government and on the U.S. president to provide benefits for these illegal immigrants who are in our country illegally. What do you want President Trump to do for the Salvadorans who are living illegally in the United States of America? And I want to tell you something. I heard from this man, from the president of El Salvador, something that I have never heard from the president of Mexico or Panama or Honduras or Brazil or any foreign country for that matter. Because all you hear, especially in Latin America, all you hear from these foreign leaders is how they are outraged if their citizens living in our country get deported. How often do we hear from the president of Mexico that he's outraged that his citizens are turned away at our border and that they're deported or that they're arrested for breaking our immigration laws? Back in the day, that was a thing that would happen in this country. And this man, President Bukele, he looked at me in the eyes and he said, I'm the president of El Salvador. And I want every Salvadoran who has left this country to go to your country, to come back home. My job, he said, is to make El Salvador the greatest country on this planet where all Salvadorans will want to live and thrive. I am not going to use my position as president of El Salvador to put pressure on other countries to take care of my citizens. My job is to take care of my citizens. And so my message is not to President Trump. My message is to my fellow Salvadorans to come home. And I am going to make El Salvador a place where you will never want to leave. I kid you not, I got shivers when I heard him say this. Have you ever heard a world leader say that? In fact, if you are a world leader, if you are the president of Mexico, the president of Nicaragua, of Panama, if you're the president of Venezuela, and you're spending all your energy to make sure that your citizens are treated properly when they are living illegally in this country, how do you look yourself in the mirror, for God's sake? What the hell are you doing? You're the president of Mexico, and your priority is to make sure that Mexicans who fled your country under your leadership are taken care of elsewhere? You're a disgrace. You should step down. Your job every single day should be make your country a place where your citizens will want to stay and live and thrive. And that's what this guy in El Salvador has been doing. And that's the difference leadership can make. President Bukele, by the way, is in D.C. starting tomorrow. He's going to be at the CPAC conference, and hopefully we'll be able to see even more of him and learn more from him. He's an inspiring guy. A very inspiring guy. Also inspiring is what we're seeing from the conservative leader in Canada. He's one of our favorites, Pierre Poilievre. That's right. I pronounced it correctly. I had promised earlier in the year that I would only pronounce his name correctly if he actually beats Justin Trudeau. But I've decided after this latest exchange that he deserves it. Pierre Poilievre, facing down a couple of critics there. Well, one reporter who was a critic, another reporter who seemed a little more friendly to the conservative side of the equation. We'll start with the critic, who is very angry that the Conservative Party is not going to support Justin Trudeau's hate speech legislation. Let's take a look at how Pierre Poilievre handled that.
The federal government has said that its online harms bill is imminent. They've said this bill will include, among other things, a ban on so-called online hate speech. As you know, the Conservatives a decade ago repealed Section 13 of the Canadian Human Rights Act, which the Liberals have talked about reintroducing and tried in the last parliamentary term. Will the Conservatives oppose the reintroduction of these provisions and the Liberals' approach to so-called online hate speech?
Yes, we will oppose Justin Trudeau's latest attack on freedom of expression. And I want to ask, what does Justin Trudeau mean when he says the word hate speech? He means speech he hates. So, for example, let's go through some of the things he said is hate speech. Jerry Butts, the PMO puppet master, said that it was hate speech to criticize Trudeau for using the ridiculous term people kind, right? Justin Trudeau said anyone who criticized him during the pandemic was engaging in hate speech. Basically, anybody who disagrees with his radical agenda when it comes to kids, he says is hate speech. He attacked Muslim parents who were protesting against his agenda. Is he going to criminalize those Muslim parents for protecting their children in schools? Go down the list of things that Justin Trudeau disapproves of, and you can imagine all of the things that will be criminalized. And then there becomes the question of who is going to be in charge of determining what is hate speech. Recently, a school board in Ontario banned Anne Frank's books. Okay, so would that be considered hate speech under Justin Trudeau's woke authoritarian agenda? I think it would. So anyone who thinks that speech they don't like is going to be criminalized and therefore the bill should be supported, go through that. Those people should go through the list of their own thoughts that Justin Trudeau considers to be unacceptable views, and you can assume that he will ban all of that as well.
100%. Thank you. Amen, brother. Pierre Poilievre, because that's exactly the problem with all of these hate speech doctrines, is that they decide what hate speech is. And by the way, dangerous speech online. Listen, I don't know a whole lot about speech laws and freedom of speech laws and public assemblage laws in Canada, but I assure you there are already laws on the books against speech that incites violent acts, right? I assure you that they're there. So whether it's online or not, if you're inciting someone to violence, you could very well face criminal prosecution. I have no doubt about that. So what are we really talking about here? Well, if Justin Trudeau, as Pierre Poilievre just laid out, and his left-wing cabinet and lawmakers get to define what hate speech is, well, we'll have the bizarro world like this woman, if you remember right, during the truckers' strike. Remember the truckers' strike a year ago with all the truckers who didn't want to get the vaccination because they literally sit alone in a truck all day long, and there's no reason why they should have to get the vaccination, and they were getting put out of work because of it, so they drove their trucks in a convoy to the Capitol. Remember this woman? This is a fellow Liberal in Canada, part of Justin Trudeau's political party.
How much vitriol do we have to see of honk honk, which is an acronym for Hail Hitler, do we need to see by these protesters on social media?
That's right. People in comment sections on Facebook were saying after she put up a video or something, they would say honk honk in solidarity with the truckers, right? Honk honk. Right? When you're on the side of a trucker and you want to show your approval, you honk honk your horn. And according to this woman, this genius, this Rhodes Scholar, this president of Mensa in Ottawa, honk honk, is really, what'd she say, Hail Hitler?
How much vitriol do we have to see of honk honk, which is an acronym for Hail Hitler?
All right, so it's not an acronym. Yeah, I thought they spoke good English up there in Canada. It's not an acronym, number one. Also, it's not Hail Hitler. I believe it's Heil Hitler. But regardless of all of that, she's proving to you right there that's hate, that's vitriol. Honk honk in a comment section would be hate speech, and you'd face criminal penalties for it if Justin Trudeau and this member of the Mensa chapter of Ottawa had their way. Here's Justin Trudeau himself talking about what he considers to be hateful speech.
I have attended protests and rallies in the past when I agreed with the goals, when I supported the people expressing their concerns and their issues. Black Lives Matter is an excellent example of that. But I have also chosen to not go anywhere near protests that have expressed hateful rhetoric, violence towards fellow citizens, and a disrespect, not just of science, but of the frontline health workers and, quite frankly, the 90% of truckers who have been doing the right thing to keep Canadians safe, to put food on our tables. Canadians know where I stand. This is a moment for responsible leaders to think carefully about where they stand and who they stand with.
I love that. I've attended protests with responsible organizations that don't engage in hateful, violent rhetoric or violent acts, like Black Lives Matter. Maybe the Black Lives Matters protests up north of our border was a little different in Canada than they were here in America, but I wouldn't necessarily call them peaceful and without hateful rhetoric or hateful actions. But Pierre Trudeau was even more explicit when he talked about this legislation they're proposing, this assault on free speech. Here, take a listen to his words.
First of all, it's what we're seeing right now across the country as people are protesting at hospitals, people are shouting at store clerks and waitresses for demanding masks or vaccinations. These are all fed by online misinformation, disinformation, deliberate sharing of anti-science conspiracy theories that are damaging our society. And we do have to stand up cleanly against that.
All right, so let's just unpack that for a second, because he gave some really good examples there. People who are upset about having to get the vaccination or wear a mask because they are apparently anti-science and guilty of misinformation, disinformation, and, as the clip goes on, hateful rhetoric that leads to violence. Well, now, the last I checked, the science has evolved on masks and on social distancing and on the vaccination itself. In fact, they had to redefine the word vaccine to accommodate the new definition that this shot for COVID actually fits into, right? Because this shot is not a vaccine in the traditional sense that if you get it, you're inoculated from catching the disease or spreading the disease. Nah, it doesn't do that. They told you it did. And if you stood up at this time and said, I don't think this vaccine keeps you from getting the disease or spreading the disease, you were anti-science and you were engaging in spreading misinformation. Now, of course, it's what the CDC and other government agencies admit to. Same with masks, same with social distancing. Recently, Anthony Fauci said he had no idea where the 6-foot distancing rule came from. It just sort of happened. Funny how that sort of happened, considering that was the one rule that motivated all of our election bureaus around the country to rely on mail-in ballots and drop boxes for ballots instead of having people stand in line to vote during the pandemic. Remember, we can't have people standing in line to vote because we can't ensure that they're socially distanced by 6 feet while they're in line and while they're voting. And yet the 6-foot rule was made up. And even Anthony Fauci says he doesn't know where it came from. But see, all of this that I'm saying right now, the reality, the truth, the facts about what happened during the pandemic lockdown, at the time, Justin Trudeau characterized all of it as misinformation and hate speech. And given the parameters of this new law that they're trying to pass, you'd face criminal penalties if you engaged in it. As Pierre Poilievre just said, rightly, you disagree with Justin Trudeau, you're guilty of hate speech. That's how they define hate speech. You know what's not hate speech in Justin Trudeau's Canada? Here's a protest recently in Canada of people who are in favor of the Palestinian terrorists and Hamas. They're protesting against Israel defending themselves. Take a look at these images. This is not hate speech. Take a look at the sign you're about to see here. No one got arrested here. The police are standing by, and they're just fine with Auschwitz. So raising the specter of the Holocaust, where millions of Jews were slaughtered by the Nazis, is literally not hate speech in Justin Trudeau's Canada. Look at where's the police? Where's the police arresting him? Not happening. The Hamas Nazis can cheer on Auschwitz in Justin Trudeau's Canada. You know what else they can do at that protest? They can give the Hitler salute. They can give the Hitler salute over there in Justin Trudeau's Canada. That doesn't fall under the auspices of hate speech. But you dare to say that maybe this mask isn't going to do anything, and maybe my child shouldn't have to wear a mask because it inhibits his breathing. Straight to jail. All right, Pierre Poilievre then got a question from apparently there's one conservative reporter in Canada. Good on him. Asked a question about radical gender ideology and whether Poilievre would support defining men as men and women as women biologically. And here's what he had to say.
For the last few years, our news organization has been covering what can only be described as a war on women. Biological males are pretending to be females, and these men are invading female safe spaces. This includes female sports ranging from volleyball to rugby. As well, men pretending to be women are gaining access to female shelters and even female prisons. This has collectively led to real women and girls being emotionally abused, physically injured. My question, sir, is should you form the next federal government, will you make female safe spaces safe again by introducing legislation that bans so-called transgender women from participating in female sports and getting access into female shelters and female prisons?
Female spaces should be exclusively for females, not for biological males. You ask if I introduce legislation on that. A lot of the spaces you described are provincially and municipally controlled. So it is unclear what federal legislation would reach federal legislation would have to change them. But obviously, female sports, female change rooms, female bathrooms should be for females, not for biological males.
There you go. I mean, Canada has a choice. It's pretty clear. And he's on the right side of that issue, too. It took him a little while, but he's there. And I do like that slogan, make female spaces safe again. Make female spaces safe again. It's not quite as good as Make America Great Again, but it's right there. Also, I recognize I said Pierre Trudeau. Well, again, I make mistakes during this show to just emphasize and prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that there's no teleprompter and this is not a scripted show. I meant Justin Trudeau. I apologize. Pierre Trudeau, of course, is Justin Trudeau's father. Unless you believe that very believable Fidel Castro rumor, but let's just stick with Justin Trudeau is his name, and I apologize for the error. All right, speaking of people who are coming around to the right side of the issue on the transgender dilemma, Dr. Phil appeared on the Joe Rogan podcast, and finally, Dr. Phil is earning the title doctor by being plain spoken and honest about what we're really seeing here with so-called gender affirming care. Take a look at this.
It's interesting they choose words like gender affirming care. You know, that's interesting that they call it that, but really what they're talking about is hormonal therapy or sex reassignment surgery on children. And in fairness, the American Medical Association, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Endocrine Society, or whatever the exact name of that is, all of the major medical associations have signed off on this, Joe. They've signed off on it. And I have never seen those organizations sign off on anything with less information as to whether or not it does long-term harm of anything in my life. And when I ask about that, when I bring that up, then they immediately label you as transphobic. And I thought that the deal was first do no harm. And all of the European countries, you know, Sweden, Norway, they've all stopped doing it because they say, we cannot say in good conscience that this does no harm, because it does harm. If you look at the long-term consequences, if someone changes their mind at 10, 11, 12, 13 years old, they can't decide which pajamas they want to wear at night. And their reason for doing it is it stops this drive for suicide, that there's a suicide epidemic. It doesn't fix that.
No, it doesn't. Thank God. Hallelujah. Dr. Phil is on our side. Finally, it took him a while. Now, listen, I know that Dr. Phil can be a punchline in some cases, and I get that. But if you deny that he has some kind of influence over a huge portion of the American public, you're not paying attention. Can someone please tell Oprah what Dr. Phil just said? Because I'd love to get her comment on this. This is hugely important. And there's more to this, by the way, that I want you to see. But just that one aspect of this incredibly destructive policy of forcing children into hormone therapy that stops the progress of puberty. Set aside the surgical procedures for a minute. The lie that we are all told, the lie that parents are told to force them down this path, it's so despicable and so wrong. When parents are lied to and said, you have a choice. You can have a transgender child who's alive, or you can have a child who's dead who didn't go through the transition. That's what they're told. You do this or your child will die. It is so incredibly manipulative and despicable and not based on fact, not based on any science. And again, it's doctors and school administrators and counselors who put themselves in a position that they know your child better than you do, convincing you that if you don't walk down this path of hormone therapy to block puberty and reverse puberty so that they start developing as something that they were not born to be, that you will send them on the path of suicide. And then the second lie that they tell parents is that it's 100% temporary and reversible. It's a lie. You only have one puberty. And if you block it from happening and then 6 years later decide, oh, never mind, you don't get another puberty. Okay? You can't at 19 years old decide, okay, let's do that puberty thing now. No, it's over. You will not develop the way you were supposed to develop. And this deceitful, despicable, hateful message that is implanted into children's minds, children who are going through the most remarkable moments of their lives that are, yes, fraught with anxiety and emotion and doubt and fear. They're then told at that time in their life that God put you in the wrong body. Good Lord. It's demonic what they're doing to these kids. And thank God, literally thank God, Dr. Phil is finally on the right side of this issue. Because I'm sorry, I'm old enough to remember when Matt Walsh went on the Dr. Phil show, and it was him against everybody else on this issue. And Dr. Phil was not there with a lifeline for our buddy Matt. But maybe he can redeem himself here. Again, more Dr. Phil on the Joe Rogan show.
I've talked to a lot of teachers, and they're telling me that they have a duty to the children that if the child is not ready to talk to their parents about this, that it's okay for them to keep a secret from the child. Now, let me tell you what my problems with this are and see what you think. If this is either a psychological phenomenon or a medical phenomenon, and the teachers are not trained in either psychology or medicine, they're not any more trained to deal with that than they are to take out the kid's spleen in the homeroom. So if that's true, if it's a psychological thing, if it's gender dysphoria, or it's a medical issue, then you need someone trained in child psychology, psychiatry, or medicine. And the teacher's not trained in any of those three things. Like I say, they're not any more trained in that than they are to take out the child's spleen. So how are they qualified to deal with that? Secondly, it's teaching the child to keep a secret from their parents. It's teaching deception and interfering between the child's relationship with their parent. Now, their issue with their justification for that is, well, if the child goes home and announces this, or if we tell it to the parent, then the child could get abused, the child could get judged, the child could get kicked to the curb. But they have to admit statistically that is very rare. And if that's the case, that's what we have Department of Child and Family Services for. That's what we have Child Protective Services for. If that's the case, then you call in for some intervention if the child is being abused at home for whatever reason. Then you get intervention in that way. But you don't come between the child and their parent. The parent has the right to know what's going on.
Amen, 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 amen again. And let me just reiterate a couple of issues there. First of all, this lie that, well, we got to keep this secret from the parents, because if the parents know, the child will be abused, thrown out on the street, or beaten up, or they'll go into some sort of, therapy, or they'll be bringing an exorcist to pray over them, or whatever, pray away the gay, or whatever it is. You got to see through this for what it is. First of all, understand that the presupposition from academia, from the left, these are all left-wing liberals. The presupposition there is that the parent is the enemy, that the parent is intolerant, that the parent is a monster, that the parent is a demon, that the parent is going to harm the child, and the child must be protected from the parent. That's the built-in presupposition that they bring to the table on this issue. And that they're the ones who are there to protect the child from their own parents, right? You have to accept that notion going in to be able to buy into this idea that a government bureaucrat with the title teacher or administrator or principal or counselor at a government school should keep a secret of a sexual nature with a minor from that minor's parent. Think about that for a second, because that's what they're advocating here. And I wish Dr. Phil were a little even more forceful about this. That suddenly a government employee is going to keep a secret of a sexual nature with a minor from that minor's parent. And we're all supposed to celebrate that? Let's take the transgender aspect of this out of it for a minute, or the sexual nature for that matter out of it, because the same applies if a kid comes out as gay to their teacher, or comes out as trans, or what have you, and the parent calls up, the parent notices that their child is going through something and their child is not opening up to them, and they notice that there's something happening, and this loving, diligent parent calls up the teacher, this hands-on parent who cares about their child, calls up the teacher and says, listen, I've been noticing that Susan is acting depressed lately. There's something going on. I know there is. Have you noticed anything at school? Have you noticed anything with Susan that I should know about? And the teacher is going to lie to that parent. There are certain states in this country right now, and if Biden has his way, it'll be every state, that want to make it mandatory for that teacher, that government employee, to lie to a parent about their own child. And we're supposed to be okay with that. And they're doing it. They're wrapping themselves in virtue that they're lying to the parent to protect the kid from the parent. And as was appropriately just said, if there really is a legitimate danger that this parent is going to cause harm to the child, call Child Protective Services. Let's open up the investigation and let's get it done right now. Because a child should not be in a home where a parent is on the verge of harming that child, right? Obviously, duh. But those laws are already in place. Explain to me how it's more beneficial to let a child continue to live in a home with a parent who's going to do them harm. And what you're going to do is exacerbate whatever situation there is there by keeping secrets from that parent. No, if there's danger, you address the danger right now. No ifs, ands, or buts. Now, as I just said, let's take the sexual nature out of this for a minute, and you'll see how illogical this is. You'll see how this policy and what they're advocating for with regard to these children who are clearly going through some really serious stuff. Maybe they need their parents now more than ever, but they're trying to separate them from their parents. As soon as we take the sexual nature out of this, you will see how incredibly illogical, irresponsible, and frankly, moronic this policy is. What they're painting for you is a scenario where a kid wants to transition to a different gender. And they go to the teacher and they say, listen, I want to start presenting as a boy here at school. I want you to call me Jim, and I'm going to dress like a boy. Don't tell my parents because they'll ground me. They'll kick me out of the house. I'll be living on the streets. I'll be homeless. Please don't tell them. And the teacher says, absolutely, we won't tell them. Right? That's the policy they're advocating for. All right. Now let's just look at this scenario a different way. Hey, Susan, why weren't you in school yesterday? Yeah, I missed school. I can't tell you why. And please don't tell my parents that I missed school yesterday, because if I do, they'll be mean to me. They'll ground me. They'll kick me out of the house, and I'll be living on the streets and I'll be homeless. So if my parents ask if I was in school yesterday, don't tell them that I was truant. Tell them that I was here. Please lie to them. Hey, Susan, you missed school last week, the entire week, and I don't have a note from your parents. What's going on? Oh, listen, I had to miss school for a week because I've got a boyfriend and he took me across state lines and we're having a lot of trouble. Please, though, don't tell my parents about this because they'll kick me out of the house and I'll be homeless. Keep this secret just between us. I got another one for you. I'm sorry, Susan, you got an F on this grade, on this test, and you're going to fail this class. And your report card is going to show that you got an F in this class. Okay, please don't tell my parents about this F. Please don't tell my parents that I failed this class. Please do not share my report card with my parents because they'll be mean to me, they'll ground me, they'll kick me out of the house, and I'll be homeless. So please, whatever you do, do not share my report card with my parents. Now, is there any school or any teacher or any administrator or any school board in this country that would allow for that policy, that would allow for a parent not to know their child's attendance record and their report card anywhere? Of course not. You'd be laughed out of the school board meeting. You know, I think we should keep these grades secret from the parents because the parents are a danger to the child. So we'll just keep the secret with the kid. So those secrets we would never keep from a parent. Those things, no. We got to share your report card. We got to share your attendance record. But your sexuality, the name you go by, the clothes you go by, the restroom and locker room you use at school, that secret is safe with us. Don't worry, we won't share that with the teachers. Or with the parents, excuse me. See, as soon as you think of it that way, you realize how insane this entire thing is and how manipulative it is. All right, we'll let Dr. Phil have the last word here.
I think a lot of it is owing to social media platforms and the internet. I think this is what I'm talking about when I say the activists, I don't think speak for the community at large. I think they get an agenda that they're pushing, and I think they really get wrapped up in this, and it gets a lot of oxygen on the internet. It gets a lot of oxygen on social media platform. Now, they say there's no social contagion here, but the girls that are claiming to be transgender, that percentage has gone up. Some reports say it's gone up 800%, 1,000% over the last several years. And they say, well, that's because they feel more comfortable talking about it now. Is that true, or is it because you read about it, you see it on social media, and you think, well, I can distinguish myself in this way? I think there is a social contagion effect. So people jump on the bandwagon, and if it's for a short period of time, but they've done things that can't be reversed, I think that's really tragic. And they say there are very few detransitioners. I don't think that's true. I think there's a lot more detransitioners that want to reverse this and come back.
Amen. And well done, Dr. Phil. Congratulations. Welcome aboard. No hard feelings. We're glad you're on the right side of this now. Finally, why don't you call Oprah, your pal, and let her know what time it is. And do us a favor. When you're done calling Oprah, pick up the phone and call Matt Walsh and apologize. And have him come back on your show. And maybe the two of you can actually move the ball down the field and actually advance this conversation in households and in homes where moms and dads are desperate to hear some common sense here on this issue that affects their children. Not your children, not the state's children, not the school's children, not the teacher's children, mom and dad's children. That's it for today's extravaganza. And just quick note, a reminder, we will not be here live tomorrow, Thursday, because we are going to be on stage at CPAC. You want to get your extra fix of Larry at noon tomorrow? Tune into the CPAC live stream. Kirk Schlichter, Matt Boyle from Breitbart, Monica Crowley, and I will all be on a panel. It actually starts around 11:30. But we will be on stage at CPAC. We'll be kicking butt there. And then we will have a special live from CPAC edition of this show on Friday. So we'll see you then. In the meantime, share our videos everywhere, like and subscribe. And if you want the audio version, go ahead and subscribe on whatever podcast platform you like listening to audio podcasts on, and leave a rating, leave a review, because that helps us out big time with our subscriptions and with our profile. Thanks a lot. My name is Larry O'Connor, and you've been watching Larry.